Good afternoon, Tewksbury. It is Thursday, November 5th, 2020, and it is 12:30 p.m. And I'd like to call this special meeting of the Tewksbury Board of Health to order. We have just one item on the agenda today, and that's Lisa's Pizza at 2312 Main Street, Tewksbury. Permit holders Danny Nasser, Treasurer, and David Arshakian request a public hearing to address the suspension of a permit to operate a food establishment is posted in a notice dated October 30th, 2020. I would just make a couple of opening comments, and I'll turn it over to you, Director Sawyer, to give us an overview of why we're having this meeting today.
Would you like to do a roll call first?
Yeah, actually, let's do the roll call first. So since we are a virtual meeting, I'd just like to do a roll call of board members. So present is Chair Ray Barry, and Vice Chair?
Robert Scarano.
Okay, Clerk?
Maria Zaroulis.
Okay, and member?
Charlie Root.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay. And then Health Department and town folks?
Susan Sawyer, Health Director.
Okay.
Karen Sullivan, Sanitarian.
Kevin Feely, Town Council.
Okay. And then just for the benefit, since it's a single topic meeting, if everyone else that is on for Lisa's Pizza, if you could just quickly introduce yourself as well.
My name is William Glass. I'm an attorney with Johnson and Borenstein, law firm at 12 Chestnut Street, and I'm here representing.
Okay.
I'm Eileen Hicks. I work with Burger Food Safety Consulting, and I've been hired by Lisa's Pizza to be their consultant for food safety matters.
Okay.
One second. Did anyone have trouble hearing that?
Yeah.
A little.
Maybe Brian. Is there any advice for that?
I'm not sure who the caller is in that 978 number, but if they could mute their line. Or if you're able to do that, Brian.
Mr. Chairman, if I unmute the caller, it's going to take it's pretty difficult for them to get back
Okay.
muting, but it is Bob Scarano's phone, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, mine ends in 55.
So are you on both your cell phone and your computer, Bob?
I am on my cell phone and my computer because I don't have any input on sound.
Okay. That's fine then. Okay. We'll finish up the introductions. So from Lisa's Pizza.
Danny Nasser, owner at Lisa's Family Pizzeria.
David Arshakian, also co-owner at Lisa's Family Pizzeria.
Okay. So thank you all for coming. I guess just as a way to start this off, Tewksbury in 2019 issued 150 food establishment permits. And while the intent is that the health department conducts an inspection of every food establishment twice a year, the reality is that is by no means feasible. And then throw in the COVID pandemic, and that makes it even more challenging. Also to note that in 2019, there were 29 recorded complaints of food-related issues, and that comes out of our annual town report, where the health department puts together statistics for the prior year. So I just wanted to sort of ground it in terms of we have 150 food established permits that are issued in Tewksbury, at least in 2019, and the health department, as it's currently staffed, is not able to even come close to doing 2 inspections per year per establishment, much less 1. And I know from the board's standpoint, we look at the inspections as not being a case where the health department goes in to try to educate the establishment owner what they should be doing, our assumption is that things should be fine. And when the health department goes in for their inspection, it's more of a quick check just to make sure that they're maintaining high standards. So I just wanted to sort of ground our conversation today in light of that, I don't want anyone thinking that just because the health department did not come by to make an inspection, that means that things are able to be done process-wise that would not pass on an inspection. So with that, Director Sora, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Susan Sawyer. I'm the health director. Thank you all for joining us today. As Ray says, this is a big part of our job, but we do a lot more things, and we appreciate all the support the board and everyone gives us, especially through COVID time. And you know, it's been a difficult time. This type of issue doesn't happen often, but Shannon and I have worked together for 5 years, and it's not uncommon that we've had to go to another level. As he said, inspections, you know, generally go with a report, and then we work with people, and sometimes it just ends up in a different level. So this is not by any means an ongoing all the time thing that happens with every restaurant or whichever, but sometimes it's necessary to be done. So in the case of Lisa's, I'm sorry, go ahead. No, okay. In case of Lisa's Pizza, I received a complaint from a resident regarding general cleanliness because it wasn't foodborne illness. If it was a foodborne illness, say someone felt they got sick, we would have been out there immediately. So that was like on a Thursday, we got the complaint. So the next week when Shannon was heading down that way for another reason, I said, you know, can you follow up this general cleanliness complaint? And she went there on the 29th, started her inspection, which I'm sure if you have any questions, you can ask her about that. So continued, you know, doing the inspection, a general inspection, also told them why she was there, that we had this complaint, started to document things, started to work with, ask questions. Apparently it came to a rise to a certain level, which everyone has a level of when you decide when something is just unsafe, that if you walk out that door and something were to happen, that's kind of our level. That's the moment we say we need to close it because it's literally unsafe for the public to eat food that comes from that location. So it rose to that level, and she closed the establishment. Came back to the office, put things together, and then we met with them on the 30th, which was Friday. Went through point by point of everything that was on the list that she had done up until that point, discussed some options, and put the posting on, which is required for suspension with the permit of without notice, and we followed the criteria of the food code. And I guess I don't know how much more you want me to talk about right now, but what led us here today is part of that permit. It has a section that the permit holder has a right to request a hearing for the board, said shall be in written form and filed within 10 days, and you would get a hearing within 3 days. I suppose I should read this part of the notice that the Board of Health that was posted so that everyone knows what we're talking about. The Board of Health had determined that the permit to operate a food establishment for the above mentioned establishment is immediately suspended. All operations related to the service of providing food to the public must cease and desist as of this date until further notice. The Board of Health has determined that the imminent health hazards required immediate suspension of the operation. Violations to high risk factors to include, but not limited to, improper sanitizing practices, improper cooling of time temperature controlled foods, staff not properly trained in food safety practices, food contact surfaces soiled. Suspension of the operation shall remain in effect until conditions of closure are corrected and confirmed by the Board of Health through means of inspection. I think I'll hold off on there for right at the moment, say where you want to head from here. Ray, do you want some information from Shannon?
Yeah, I think, Shannon, if you can just, I guess just more for us, for our benefit, we've all received your food establishment inspection report dated October 29th, and you'd also had an attached document that had 3 pages of pictures. So the inspection report sort of stands on its own with your descriptions, but if you could just sort of quickly walk us through what we're looking at in the pictures, I would appreciate that.
Okay, so the first page is really just uncleanliness, a lot of grease buildup, dirty caps, and dirty floor equipment. And then on the back of that is more uncleanliness, and then the bottom left picture is the can opener. That's just has thick flour buildup for a while. The next one is the top left is cooling chicken chicken that was placed in a refrigerator. And it might be hard to see on the pictures, but if you look, there's like some condensation, which right there shows you that it wasn't cooled properly when it was placed into the refrigerator. And then the one next to that is a broken stand-up freezer, which makes it non-cleanable. And then the bottom 2 is just, again, like more grease buildup and just uncleanliness in the establishment.
Okay, so a follow-up question for you. Over my tenure in the board, and especially in the last couple of years, we've occasionally had to have food establishments come before us when you or Susan, a combination of, have conducted an inspection of a restaurant, usually based upon a complaint, and found conditions that warranted coming before the board. In a lot of those, it was sort of cleanliness issues and just knowing they need to get back in a cleaning schedule and get that moving forward. But I think what concerned me a bit in looking at this inspection report is that out of the 11 different categories of what the FDA has determined as foodborne illness risk factors and public health interventions, there are critical violations in 8 of those 11 sections. And from my looking at that and the pictures, it looks to me like this is not just a case where there was a busy night the night before and they just did not have a chance to properly clean up. It looks like, from how I'm seeing in the pictures, and I'd like you to correct me if I'm mistaken or add to it, this does not look like this was a momentary lapse in cleaning, correct?
Yes, it was built up over a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, just as allowed in the notice, so this is a hearing that's by request of them, and this is the time where the permit holder can present evidence and address, why some of the suspension of the permit should be considered withdrawn, or possibly, as we've talked about, offer a plan for the board to approve or modify that maybe would lead to their the suspension to be rescinded.
Sure. No.
As a matter of procedure, does everyone have a copy of the inspection report, including the applicant's attorney, and Mrs. Hicks?
I have a copy of the report.
If everyone has a
Yes,
copy of the
yes, we do. Yes, we have a copy.
If everyone has a copy of the report, I would just move that the report be put into the record as part of this hearing.
The report as well as the 3 pages of attached pictures.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so go ahead.
Great. So, as I said before, I'm Gordon Glass. I'm representing the owners of Lisa's Pizza. I think the matter before the board today is fairly narrow. The question is whether the establishment is ready to be reopened. I think to determine whether the establishment is set to be reopened, we should kind of turn to guidance that Ms. Sawyer gave on October 30th. So she visited Lisa's Pizza on October 30th to review the health inspection report from October 29th that Ms. Sullivan put together. On the 30th, Ms. Sawyer did discuss with Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian the content of the health inspection report line by line. And based on her observations of the report, Ms. Sawyer brought a proposed agreement that kind of outlined what Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian could do to get Lisa's Pizza reopened. That agreement could kind of be summarized down to having two key requirements. First, Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian were required to contract with a food safety consultant who would inspect the pizzeria, observe the operations there, train the employees, and prepare recommendations for ensuring ongoing compliance with best food safety practices. I think that portion of the recommendation is really what's critical here, because listening to the board speak so far, there are some concerns about potentially ongoing practices at the pizzeria that the employment of a food safety consultant and the guidance of a food safety consultant could certainly correct now and correct going forward. I believe the owners have met that requirement. They promptly hired Eileen Hicks, who is a food safety consultant who is here with us today. In just a minute, I'm going to kind of pass the microphone as it is to Ms. Hicks, who can speak in more detail about the fact that she's been contracted by Lisa's Pizza. She's already held a 2.5-hour food safety session with the employees. She's performed a walkthrough of the restaurant and noted in her walkthrough that all the concerns raised in the health inspection report have been addressed and corrected. And she's also prepared an action plan to ensure ongoing compliance with best food safety practices, which includes, further observation, training, and inspections. The second and final requirement for the reopening of Lisa's Pizza was that a health inspection find, and we'll quote, substantial improvements to the cleanliness of the establishment and the demonstration of knowledge on how to properly sanitize food contact surfaces. As I just mentioned, Ms. Hicks has determined Lisa's Pizza has substantially improved cleanliness, and Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian are more than prepared to demonstrate knowledge on how to properly sanitize food contact surfaces. So I would say in short that Lisa's Pizza is prepared for the reinspection outlined in that agreement, and it's prepared to reopen under those terms. Mr. Nasser, Mr. Shaky, and myself and Eileen are here to answer any questions the board have and kind of request that reinspection be scheduled as soon as possible so we can get the ball rolling on reopening the restaurant. So with that initial comment, with the board's permission, I'd like to toss the mic over to Ms. Hicks and see what she'd like to add.
Sure, no, that's fine.
Hi, I just want to make sure you can hear me all right.
Yep, we can.
So everybody could, great, because I don't think you could hear me when I first introduced myself. I did perform kind of an emergency food safety 101 on Monday night. I met them there about 4:45 p.m. We conducted a full food safety 101. We covered all high-risk factors. And I did perform a very brief walkthrough of the establishment. It's not a large establishment. It didn't really take me long to do that. I really would like to have the opportunity once they get open, even if it's the day they open and it can work in my calendar. I want to do what's called a hands-on inspection where I can actually do training on site with them. It's one thing to sit down and do a whole food safety 101. It's more important for me to see them doing and performing their duties so I can make the adjustments and make sure they are in compliance with the food code.
Okay, thank you for that. Just so that everyone is aware, we have in the last year or two, taken to when we have a food establishment that has issues that prompt coming before the board, especially where it comes to food safety or cleanliness issues, we have just all the time recommended is what was done here, that a food safety consultant be retained to do an initial inspection of their own, independent of what the health department did. And then based on that, put together their action plan, which sounds like you did, and put together a training plan. And I'm glad to hear that there was staff training done. But what we're also focused on is knowing that a lot can happen during that very initial upfront period. And our focus is more on ensuring that the training that was received and whatever materials were provided to the establishment to aid them, whether it's checklists or manuals, that they continue to do as promised or do what's on those forms according to best practices, so that the health department does not have to go back and sort of be the one to make sure that everything's being done, but it should be getting done already. And so what we've typically done is we've typically had a food safety consultant be retained for X number of months, and have asked that whatever monthly inspection report they do, that they turn a copy over to the health department, which is then copies are provided to the board members, just so we can see that things are going in the right path. Because we're more focused on the food safety side and knowing that there's whatever has been done is a long-term solution, and that's best evident by inspection reports over a period of time that document continued compliance. In some cases, we've put a stipulation in that the consultant needs to be on board doing the monthly inspections until there's been a minimum of 3 consecutive monthly inspections where there have been 0 deficiencies found at all. So those are just some of the paths that the board has taken on previous instances. So I guess I will reserve any more comments now, but I'll turn it over to my other board members. Right now, we're just focused on the food permit issue. So Mr. Scarano, is there anything you would like to ask or add?
The one thing that concerns me is that with the buildup of cleanliness problems, that the permittee is proceeding under a written plan, number one. I certainly can understand Ms. Hicks doing an emergency food safety 101 that generally doesn't meet the requirements to be a permit holder. I would expect that the food safety 101 would obviously involve the checklist that Ray was talking about, that they're familiar with the practices of operating food safely, storing food safely, preparing food for cooling safely. And I'm sure that Ms. Hicks 101 safety course may have involved all of that. I would feel much more comfortable if there was a checklist of what the safety 101 course entailed. Number two, one of the concerns I have is that all of the equipment is operating and being maintained. I don't know if we have a planogram of what equipment's in there or a list of what equipment is in there. Generally, that is utilized when the permittee originally gets their food permit. And I can only just question Shannon and Susan on whether or not we have a planogram of the equipment in there, including all of the equipment that they use in the preparation of their food, so that I'm sure that the permittees are familiar with the maintenance requirements of those pieces of equipment, and when to call a maintenance person to come in and address them. When there's temperature issues on an original investigation, I look to that because Food Crash Courses Food Safety 101 doesn't cover that. These folks have been operating in there, and I think it's fair to say that they were operating and there was a chance of serious physical or health related risk to the consumers. I'm not okay with just moving to opening without some adequate assurances that these things are being met, that I have a planogram, they know what the equipment is, they know how to maintain it, someone's responsible for maintaining it on a daily basis, and that they can report a problem to a required mechanic when it arises. That is something that should be part of this plan that's being presented to the board for jumping from A to Z, which would be serious violations, a lot of problems, to opening, which would be Z. In between, you were recommended, at least by the director, to sign a document that was presented to you. And listen, I agree that maybe you needed to seek counsel, and that's why you got Gordon Glass to come and take a look at that. But you did not sign even an acknowledgement that these violations existed. That in itself bothers me, because I think the first thing that has to happen when someone raises a problem is that you use a thumb to point to yourself and say, yep, I'm responsible, I'm going to take care of this. That didn't happen, and you may want to get counsel, and that's okay. I'm glad you did get counsel. Now that you have counsel, we're here to make sure that we have a comprehensive plan in place to allow you to open, so that we can get to an inspection point and adequately assure the first complainant that we've addressed what his idea of cleanliness was. May or may not have been substantiated on that day, but obviously was substantiated by a full report, which is now in the record. And with that, I think you have to incrementally get through this with a plan, a written plan, the planogram, and everything else that's necessary to run a food establishment. I feel that you need to demonstrate, as well as just say, that we can handle this thing, and that you have all the help in the world with Mr. Glass and Ms. Hicks to do that. I also have another concern. I know for a fact that we have a grease problem at this establishment. You've admitted that to the board, and I'm not even sure that maintenance on the grease separator is part of what you do in that establishment. But I can tell you, I'm very concerned about how that's being facilitated, who is in charge of that, how it's going to be facilitated through this maintenance plan, food safety plan, because you have equipment you may have come upon when you bought it. I don't even know if you're thoroughly trained to handle that aspect of food operations in that building. And that's one thing that I would like Ms. Hicks to tell me as a board member, that you're capable of making sure that whatever grease is being generated in that place is being handled and disposed of properly. And that all of the protocols necessary to put grease in a drain are being handled and met. Because that's one of the things that I would like to be assured of, is that you are handling fog in a responsible manner. It's being handled with the equipment that's on site, and that you're able to maintain that equipment on site, thus the planogram, And that would be what I would be looking for as a board member, to say, yes, they look like they're ready to open this back up because they're fully trained on their own equipment. They understand it. They can operate it. They have themselves and employees that are delegated to do that. And that would give me the adequate assurances necessary for me to assent to an opening. Thank you.
And Maria?
Hello. I agree with a lot of what Bob had to say. My concerns are that, judging from the photos, it appears that this issue's been going on for quite some time. So my concern is, have there been any operational plans for other employees that you have there to, have daily checklists as far as cleaning, weekly, monthly, for all of those things? It doesn't appear that that has been happening. And will that be something that is set up going forward? I don't know how many employees you have at Lisa's Pizza, but I'm assuming that you have shifts and et cetera, that people would be maintaining all of these things. In addition to the lack of knowledge, perhaps, with safe food handling and preparation is a concern of mine. Bob did bring up the grease trap, and I believe that the grease trap that you currently have is something that you have to maintain on your own. So my worry is that if you're struggling to maintain cleaning other areas of your business, how will you be able to maintain that grease trap? I don't know how often it's cleaned, if it's daily or weekly, but that is a concern to me. So I think, again, that's something that Ms. Hicks would sit with you and set up. I would hope.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I could respond to a couple of these points.
Sure, go right ahead.
So I believe it was Vice Chair Scarano on the phone. I just want to respond to two of the points he made, and one that was followed up here. First, Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian didn't sign the acknowledgement when it was presented to them on October 30th, not out of a non-cooperative posture. In fact, they promptly went out and hired Ms. Hicks, did a thorough cleaning, started staff training. They promptly tried to respond to each and every one of the concerns on the health inspection report. The reason they didn't sign the agreement on the 30th is because they were concerned about binding themselves to hiring a food safety consultant in any sort of time frame with the uncertainty of the COVID pandemic. And they didn't want to put their signatures on a form that maybe required them. They didn't understand whether the form required them to go out and hire this safety consultant in a certain time frame, and they were worried about setting themselves up for a violation of an agreement there. So again, they didn't choose not to sign the form out of a non-cooperative posture, and they just wanted to protect themselves from potentially having an issue there. But they did find Miss Hicks rather quickly, and she's here with us today, and she's already been working with them. So I hope that speaks to that concern. When it comes to the grease trap concern, certainly Miss Hicks could work with Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian on that. But I think it's important to clarify for the board today that the board is familiar with Paul Ross and the variance he sought for the grease trap. Mr. Ross is still representing Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian with regards to the grease trap. That's a separate issue, a separate representation. That's not was not considered to be within the scope of what we're before the board for today. So if the board has questions, specific questions regarding the grease trap, Mr. Ross has indicated that he's still available to work with the board in resolving those questions. Thank you.
So I would just quickly, in response, just not to leave Attorney Glass hanging, there's no prejudice towards the applicants for not signing the agreement. And I think the board, as well as the director and the sanitarian, understand that they went to work immediately about bringing the conditions into some degree of compliance. So there's no prejudice asserted or meant on the agreement. What that leads us to is whether there's an agreement today that would be signed, because counsel has been representing them and Ms. Hicks has been representing them. And we're still in the position that we have outstanding violations, and an agreement today is what we're seeking. And I'm glad you're all here to come to some understanding so that we can move to an agreement. So again, no prejudice intended, and I fully respect your client's rights to seek counsel. But when you're running a food establishment, you're the one that's responsible, and that's what I meant by the thumb, okay? You just have to step up to the plate. It looks like they did. Secondly, as it relates to the grease trap variance is not in front of the board today. As a matter of fact, it's not even a consideration today. What a consideration today is that they have the Big Dipper over there. It's a piece of equipment I'm very familiar with. I've had them. I've maintained them. I know what the complications are. I am concerned that they know what the complications are. I don't know what training that they've had in cleaning that. I don't even know if they've ever cleaned it. That's why I'm looking to Ms. Hicks to bring them into the realm of restaurant maintenance, because as we know, a lot of people do it themselves. They don't dial out. They don't call. I can understand that because it's expensive to do that. But we need adequate assurances that they can do it, because they obviously in the past have not reached out. And I don't know how long that period of time was, but by the report, it speaks for itself. And now I don't want that to happen with the grease, let's call it technology that they're using. So I would have that be part of the plan. I would expect Ms. Hicks to go through it with them, to be able to call in Paul Ross, who is familiar with the technology, train them on it, come back to the board and say, yes, they're trained on it. We know that they might replace this technology, but they know how to keep fog out of our system, and they know how to treat the grease that's leaving their preparation pans. So that's where I was going with that. So again, no prejudice on the stepping up immediately. The concern is not the fact that there might be new equipment, that the old equipment can be maintained while we get through this process.
I understand and appreciate your comments. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't, come too close to conflating the variance discussion with the discussion before the board today. But I see that we're on the same page on that. And I'd just like to briefly respond and say, the Mr. Nasser and Mr. Shakian are prepared to come to an agreement. In fact, based on what was presented to them on October 30th, they've taken substantial action and are willing to take, more substantial action going into the future, which Ms. Hicks can speak to far better than I can. But the point I would make is, though they didn't sign that agreement on October 30th, they've been taking action directly responsive to the requirements of the agreement. So they've really held a posture as though they were under that agreement with the town. So I think Ms. Hicks could continue to speak to the ongoing practices.
Absolutely. I just want to back up. We talked about the food safety 101. Maybe you don't know what it actually encompasses. It encompasses everything from proper personal hygiene, time and temperature controls, how to cool foods properly, how to cook foods properly, how to hold foods, and it also covers cleaning and sanitizing. I also covered COVID-19 and how to properly do disinfection. We all chatted about it. We made sure they have the proper postings up. We are going to be developing a cleaning checklist, daily, weekly, and monthly cleaning checklist. We did go through most of the equipment on my quick walkthrough. I will make sure they're properly trained. So you have a little idea of where I have come from. I have about 30 years in kitchen and high quantity food production. I have run nutrition programs, and then I came over to food safety and have been working with Burger Food Safety Consulting for the past 6 years. Burger Food Safety has been around for 24 plus years, and we are trying to as far as how we can train people and follow up. The thing is, I don't want to put down in writing exactly what we're going to do until I see them in action and where their deficiencies are. I am recommending my first hands-on training, that I will be with them. We will do training. I will do a full inspection. Within 48 hours of that inspection, you will get a full copy of the inspection report. The board, I will send it directly to the Board of Health. If I feel I need to be there 2 days later, I will be there 2 days later. If I'm not comfortable with the situation, I will be there the next day. If there are any priority issues, we will deal with them immediately, and we will make those corrections. And as they get better, then I will come less frequently. But I do agree. I think the first hands-on, I'm going to probably give them 48 hours, and then I will be back. And then I will maybe be able to push it out to a week, and maybe it will be once a month. And then we'll see where we go from there. It really is dependent on how they perform in my eyes. I am tough. I will be completely honest with you. You can ask anybody that I've taken care of in the past. They call me Mean Eileen for a reason, but I'm fair. I'm fair and I can teach. I've taught a lot of people in the past. So I really think we can handle this as long as they have the buy-in, and I will let you know immediately if they don't.
Well, I appreciate that, and we know your qualifications. I don't have any doubt that you're able to guide these folks directly through exactly what it was that you had talked about. Tell me one thing. How long was this 101 crash course with your clients? How long did that take, Eileen? Excuse me, Ms. Hicks.
That's fine. You can call me Eileen. That's fine. I got there. We started at 4:45. We finished at about 7:15 because I made them stay the extra 15 minutes because we reviewed illness policies and I made them all sign off on an illness policy.
And I know we haven't had the answer to the planogram of equipment, but as part of your familiarization, I'd like you to look at that planogram, and I'd like you to address specifically all of the requirements on the planogram with them, because that's really the kind of feedback in your report, and I'm sure it's that thorough, that we get, so that we have a comfort level that they have a very fair understanding of what it takes to maintain this equipment, all of it, including their waste issues. Okay, so I know that you seem to have addressed that. I'm glad that you're taking that into consideration. I want to make sure that you have a planogram or you make your own. I need to have the model numbers and those other things so that they understand where to go for that information. It's online. Put the model number in, find out what the recommended manufacturer's recommendations are for periodic maintenance. And they also have cleaning, what not to use, what to avoid, when to do it. And periodic. Those are the types of completeness that I thought you would bring to the table on their behalf. And I think that kind of report from you is exactly what this board is looking for, so that they can say they're operating without a risk to the public. And that's what this comes down to. Are they capable? Do they have the people backing them up, so that there is no risk, or it's reduced to at least the level that we can all say is within tolerances? But I thank you again for going over those issues, and I'll leave it up to the other board members to fill in. Thank you.
Mr. Glass, I'd like to ask your clients a couple of questions, if I may.
Go ahead.
It would help us as a board to sort of understand your background, sort of. Is this the first food establishment that you folks have purchased and run? Have you run others? Who's had the Safe Serve certification and so on? So if you just give us a brief background of your food industry experience.
Hi, I'm David. We've both worked at, this is the only restaurant we've owned, which we've been there for over 7 years now. We've both worked at multiple restaurants. I've managed the restaurant. I have the Surf Safe. I've had it throughout the entire ownership of Lisa's Family Pizzeria. Danny has also worked at multiple restaurants. We've worked at a couple together. I've worked at diners. I've worked at like higher end sit-down restaurants. I've worked at like a sub shop. So we both have a lot of experience. He's worked at a very busy restaurant in Cambridge for multiple years, Domino's. So yeah, we both have experience. And just to comment on our equipment, most of our refrigerators are brand new. Anything that's ever broken, we've fixed immediately. And if it's something that isn't if it's something that's older than 3, 4, 5 years, we get a new one. We won't even keep it. Shannon didn't comment on any of our equipment not working correctly. And we maintain everything. We have like at least 5 numbers to call if anything does go wrong with our equipment. We have a card book. We call anyone immediately if it's necessary. We have multiple people to call if something breaks. And like I said, most of our equipment is brand new and under warranty. So we don't even have to pay to fix most of it. We just call, they send someone for free and fix it.
Okay, and then between the two of you, if there was an org chart of who actually works the restaurant, are you two there at all or in any
We're there.
certain amount of time?
One of us is always there.
Okay. So historically, we never look at sort of why things have got to the point they are. We just know that whatever's happened in the past has happened. We're focused moving forward. That's why for us, we really believe that the educational component is essential for getting the business back on a good trajectory. And that's why we encourage hiring the food safety consultant. I think I would just look at having two owners that have been in the food service industry for a while. It gives me some comfort knowing that once a manual is put together by Ms. Hicks, that it's folks that should understand intimately what is being asked of in that report, as opposed to someone that you just bought. This is a lark, it's a hobby for you, and you've never been in the food service industry before. So I'm glad to hear that you had that food service experience.
We work hard. We're not sitting at home while our employees work.
Okay. I guess I'm just sort of puzzled with how things got to where they are, given your background. So I'm glad that there is a path moving forward, but we really need to ensure that once the path of the trajectory is going where it should be going, that it is maintained for long term.
We will maintain it. Yes, we weren't for any second saying that we only got at first we thought that what Susan had proposed to us was, we were never against that for even a second. We made it very clear to Susan that day. We're just scared that, because we don't know what's going on with COVID, and we don't know how long it's going to take to find a consultant. We've never done that. We've never hired a consultant. We don't know and we just didn't want to, for more so employee reasons, we don't want to be shut down for say a month, because we would just simply lose our employee, because they can't go that long without working. And they're texting us, calling us every day saying, can we come back to work? Can we come back to work? Should I look for another job? And that was our biggest concern, was just time. But before Susan even left our parking lot, Danny was downstairs on the computer looking for a consultant, like immediately. And we actually called within an hour, once we already had the contract was ready, within an hour or so. And we called Susan, but it was Friday, so we waited until Monday to get a reply for that. But we were ready to do anything you guys asked. We're not arguing. We're not trying to fight you. And both of us work 60 hours a week. We're not lazy. We're ready to do whatever needs to be done.
Okay.
And the only follow-up I have is how many employees do you have?
Including us 2, and about 9 more, I believe.
Okay, and when I was in business, and I'm not saying this for any reason, when a health inspector came into my establishment and pointed out a deficiency, I immediately held a meeting with my employees, because as the owner, sometimes my focus was on the big picture rather than the little picture. And one of the things that we're looking from you is the fact that you have a number of employees that can spot these deficiencies. They are 18 other eyes that should be reporting to you. And those are the types of things when Chairman Barry said, you know, it went on for a bit. It's the 18 sets of eyes that are running through your business and not recognizing the fact that there needs to be a chain of command and someone needs to report that to the two responsible parties, which are both of you guys. So when I talk about Ms. Hicks and her approach, my approach is always to make sure that my employees who are texting me for jobs and making sure that they're getting a paycheck are on board with the idea that, you know, some of these things can be overlooked by the owners, but they have to be familiar themselves with the rules and regulations. And the only one that can teach them that is you guys. And if you're not teaching it to them, you got to hand them a book and say, these are your responsibilities. You watch the temperature on unit 1. You write it down when you're running in and out with pizzas, or however you want to do it. But those are the things that make a successful restaurant, is the fact that you know who you delegated it to. There is a point of responsibility that you can point to, and you can make them better at their jobs. And then what you do is you give everybody a feeling that that operation is clicking, not clacking, but clicking. Thank you.
And I'd like to respond to that and say I think we do have a you know, I think that's what Miss Hicks is here for. You know, the restaurant was closed on October 30th. The next day they had you know, they were trying to reach the town about their contact with Miss Hicks. And the agreement from October 30th discussed ongoing training into the future, but it did not discuss training before reopening or training before this meeting. But they went ahead and had Miss Hicks do this 2.5-hour crash course with their employees on Monday night. And I think they're prepared, and they've demonstrated already that they're interested in an ongoing process where they work with Miss in a collaborative setting with their employees and get everyone up to speed and where they need to be.
Can I chime in for 1 second? I will say it was an emergency because it was more of an emergency on my side that I had to get there for 2 hours. Multiple of their employees could answer questions about proper cooking temperatures and things like that. So the basis is there. They know how to do things. I think what we're all talking about is becoming active managers. So actively controlling the day-to-day operations and actually training every single day. It never stops. You guys know that. I mean, you know that if you've worked in a kitchen, you think it's like kindergarten. You still have to babysit. You still have to actively manage the day-to-day operations.
Okay, so
Mr.
Susan,
Chairman.
go ahead, Mr. Rube.
Yeah, I don't mean to cut in like this, but I mean, this to me, when I'm looking at these, this information that's been forwarded to me, this is a sanitation issue to me, and it's in my opinion a behavioral issue that exists within the four walls of that business. It seems to me, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Is the analogy I think we can use with this. And based on what my background is everybody knows what it is that I've got a concern as to, from an operator's perspective, with what this new contraption is that Paul Ross presented to us less than a month ago regarding the grease trap and the proper disposal of that grease at that site. I think Mr. Ross properly introduced us to the product, but I have a concern with the operators of that product. And it's a newfound concern that I wasn't in light of until I saw this report. And again, I think it's a behavioral issue in the four walls of that restaurant, and especially within COVID. I mean, you would think that people in this line of business would have taken a little bit more attention to sanitation amidst COVID. That's all I have to say for right now. Thank you.
Okay, and let me just try to complete that conversation part, because to your point, Mr. Glass, the variance modification is not part of today's hearing. It just happens to be at the same mailing address, shall we say. However, just because the board members do have concern, which again has no bearing on this matter at hand today, I think it would be best served if I add it to an agenda item for our next public hearing, which is on Thursday, the 16th of November, which hopefully give time for Mr. Ross to attend, because we would just like to express our concerns, and maybe things may get rectified by then, between now and then, in terms of the training and what our sanitarian and director have found when we've done the re-inspections. But at this point in time, we'd be looking at having an agenda item for our meeting on the 16th, just to revisit that variance modification. But again, that is no bearing on what we're doing today. This is a separate and distinct issue. So Susan, I'd like to sort of, yes.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification. In my mind, again, this is not a passive, that contraption is not a passive piece of equipment. It's got to be tended to as the Big Dipper. And it appears to be there's a sanitation issue within the four walls of that business. And I think it feels to me that it's all one thing. It's, you know, if we're going to allow them to use this thing, which is within the variance, or if we're going to allow them to maintain the variance, they've got to show us that they're not only able to maintain this thing, but they're willing to do it. This is I think, and again, this appears to be a behavioral thing. Everybody's certified, everybody's qualified, everybody knows what's right, and yet we have all these problems amid COVID. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, and I think just to close your point of concern, as Mrs. Scarano had asked Ms. Hicks to try to ensure that whatever training materials or courses put together, that it does include the proper and safe operation of all equipment there at the location, including the existing Big Dipper mechanical fog extractor. So we're looking at that all being part of what we've done in the training, because everything needs checklists and maintenance schedules, and that all needs to be part of the training and responsibilities assigned. So Susan, I think at this point, I think the board members have expressed our concerns. We've heard from this establishment owner, the food safety consultant, their attorney. I'd like you to give us some guidance in terms of your opinion as to what's your recommendation in terms of next steps as it pertains to the health department, in terms of what conditions would you like to see be met before you'd be willing and able to conduct a reinspection?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the work that Eileen has done so far. One thing, if you look back at the agreement that we did not enter into, and just so everyone knows, the reason I do this is there's a clear path in the code from when you close a place to when you reopen. And over my 26 years, I've found that if I can mediate that path in the middle, we can avoid this part and still end up with the same result. And that being that, if you look at what I wrote, I don't say exactly what to do. We say there's a problem. Shannon identifies the problems specifically. And then what we want to do is empower the professional to come up with the best plan for that particular restaurant. Because it's really not our job to identify where the gaps are. We might see something dirty, but the gap may not be that thing. It might be who they assign it to or when they do it. So I really like to empower the person. I've learned through the years not to be too specific in my requests. So that I really think is the most important thing going forward. I see what they say has been done and what Mr. Mr. Glass said has been done. I agree too that the most important thing now is if they've met the minimum cleaning. And the reason I use that substantial word in my agreement was because the point was to get them up and running safely and then having a professional identify while observing, because you can't just walk into a closed place and find the gaps that you need to find. So I still stand with that recommendation. I think now they have the training. I don't know if I'm concerned that they don't know how to make sanitizer. I suspect that they know how to make it. It's just a matter of if they use it in the right times. And so we would have to discuss that on the inspection. But the next step would be an inspection, according to what I'm hearing from the report, that it seems like it's substantially clean. So we'd have to schedule that inspection and go to that next step, because I really think Eileen has a lot to bring to the table as far as beyond the education of knowing why you do things. That's what we try to do in our trainings. We were always taught in inspections to try and teach. And unfortunately, it's a good thing, which we do, but now you've seen the result is that we don't have time to do it that way. So the new code is really the managerial control, really putting it on the managers, the persons in charge, to actually know why they do things, and not certainly we would teach them things when we go there, but not for that to be our primary goal, because if that's our goal, if that's what we go for, we don't get our 2 times a year. So our goal is to be people who confirm, yes, everything is going well here, and for people to be excited when we walk in the door and not necessarily saying, oh no, here they come. It'd be like, oh yeah, we're still doing that. We're still working on that. Come and show me, here's the checklist. And I guess knowing the code and not even, so there's cleaning, there's processes, but even understanding the code, I appreciate they've bought new equipment. However, I have no knowledge that what they've bought and when they bought it. And part of having a permit is understanding when you have to contact the health department. So that could be part of the training I wouldn't have thought of until just this moment. So when do you contact the health department? What type of illnesses? There are the big 6 or 7 now, Eileen, I can't remember. Big 7 now? You may not remember or no. Big 6. That you have to call us. Now we're trying to hard, and now there's the 7 if you add the COVID. People are supposed to call us if someone has COVID. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like we need to move to the next level. We need to have that inspection done and have a comfort level that at least the imminent safety issues are. I wouldn't mind doing the inspection with a representative from Berger at the time, and that is fine with me too. Whatever. And if there's any issues.
If I might chime in for a second, Ray.
Please.
You, as well as the other board members, know that we rely heavily upon Shannon and Susan Sawyer to facilitate what's necessary in the opening and closing emergencies and reopening. They are the feet on the ground. They are the ones that report to us. They are the ones that are going to be handling the ministerial end of this that comes from Ms. Hicks and Mr. Nassar and his partner, and through Mr. Glass. these are the things that we expect to happen. I think that everyone is of the position they can deliver these types of things to Shannon, who's going to be doing the reinspection with Ms. Sawyer. So I would first pose the question to the board that there would really be no reason to return here for another hearing if we can rely on Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Sawyer to facilitate the necessities from Ms. Hicks and Mr. Glass and the applicants. That would be the first step, that we at least allow them to go through the process, review the materials. If there's a question, then it comes back here. If there's no question and they feel that they are in somewhat compliance, that could be entertained on the next hearing with the, you said November 16th, didn't you, Mr. Barry?
Yes.
So I would expect to get a report in the interim from Ms. Sullivan and Ms. Sawyer regarding the progress made with Ms. Hicks, and that they would be responsible for determining compliance and issuing a reopen at the time they feel comfortable that compliance has been met. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Barry.
Okay, and I think that more as a discussion for the board members present, I would like to sort of use the same playbook we've used successfully at other similar instances where we have an order of condition that the food safety consultant be retained for X number of months and perform monthly inspections, that the report is submitted to the health department immediately thereafter. And I think recently we've been saying that needs to continue until there have been 3 successive reports submitted to the health department that have had 0 deficiencies, so that at least there's a way that we have some comfort level to gauge that the training and the materials that have been prepared are actually being implemented. Because again, as Susan mentioned, they don't have the time to be going around making sure that people are implementing what we've had an outside party do, but they're more trying to provide that positive reinforcement to continue to encourage the good practices that we'd hope to see in all restaurants. So with that, I just entertain to the comments from the members. I'm thinking we look at having the consultant be retained until such time that 3 monthly inspections have turned up 0 deficiencies.
Is that a motion, Mr. Chairman?
No, you
just
can't
for
make a
discussion.
motion.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
As part of the discussion, I think Ms. Hicks can provide her contract with the establishment. I'm sure she has a standard form that can entertain and include the conditions that we're talking about here, and her duration, which would go a long way in being entered into the record as part of the solution to this problem. So having her contractually bound to do these things would be sufficient in my mind, that she's on board for the durational period, and she's going to provide the interim reports that will lead us to her ability to move on to her next set of clients and periodically check in on her past. So at that point, that would be one of the things I'd be looking for. The second thing I'd be looking for is some sort of training manual from Ms. Hicks that indicates that she's spoken to the employees and that so haven't the owners, and there is some spirit of cooperation about how this thing gets done operationally. It's not one person. It's many people that have to make this work. I think that she can address that part in her training, and that she can assure or provide adequate assurances to the board that the employees understand that portion of it. Again, with that, I think we're moving towards an agreement that everyone can tacitly, if not sign on to, and allow the sanitation experts and the director to handle this thing from an administrative matter without bringing it back before the board.
Maria Chow, anything else to add to that? Okay, Bob, so you want to put that in the format of a motion, Bob?
I will. I'll make the motion that the applicant's expert, Ms. Hicks, provide a contract with the facility signed by the corporation or its members of DBA, that there is a due authority for them to enter into that contract for a specific duration. And Ray, I'm going to leave that duration up to 3 reports provided by Ms. Hicks that indicate no substantial violations, and for an initial period of 6 months in order to facilitate that, and that those costs be borne directly by the applicants. That Ms. Hicks' report include the follow-up necessary and a periodic schedule of appointments that she feels is necessary in her reports in order to check off all the boxes that were checked off on the violation, to assure us that each one of those violations has been addressed and doesn't need to be addressed in a continuing fashion. And lastly, the planogram. We want to know what kind of equipment is in there. We want to know the serial numbers, the dates that they're operational, and we would like to get a document that says anticipated replacement because of obsolescence or because of mechanics. Just so that we understand that you're continually following up with your operations. Lastly, I want to be assured that you're trained on the Big Dipper. And I want Ms. Hicks to address what's necessary and who's responsible for maintaining the Big Dipper until your new equipment comes in. And that, I suspect, you would rely on your engineer to familiarize yourself with that. But that's obviously an open-ended issue.
The motion got a little long on that one.
I'm sorry on the wordiness, but as it relates to the Big Dipper, that they're trained on how to operate it and maintain it.
Right. Thank you.
That would be the 4 items I had.
Okay. And we're willing to second that motion.
I will second the motion without all the words, because I don't think I could repeat all of that. I will second that motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Motion's been put forth.
Thank you for reminding me. I was a little wordy. Thank you.
Work on that.
Yeah, no lawyer jokes about that will come from that.
That's right. No lawyer jokes.
So the motion's been put forth and seconded, and we'll do a verbal roll call. So Vice Chair Scarano, yay or nay?
Yay.
Clerk Zaruz?
Yay.
And Member Rue?
Yay.
And Chair votes aye as well. The motion carries unanimously 4-0. So I think just the final part to close on this, unless you were going to say it, Susan, is it sounds like at this point, the opening is something that you'll coordinate with Ms. Hicks in terms of a reinspection, whether it's done combined or that she's there when you're there, but just now ball's in your court.
We can speak, yes.
Yep.
And
Great. Updated planogram, I guess, is in order, Ms. Hicks. There looks like there's a planogram in the file.
Boy, they're efficient.
They are.
well, that it was previously known as Bianca's, and this is really Bianca's, so I can't imagine how accurate it is at this point with the changes they've made. So,
well, if I have the floor plan, I can get all the spec sheets together for it, so no problem. Any new equipment.
Okay, well, Mr. Rue, it is now time for your motion been you typically make at our meetings.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we close this meeting so I can get back to work and feed my family.
Someone willing to second the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. So motion's been put forth and second to adjourn today's meeting. All those in favor signify by stating aye. We'll take a roll call vote. Vice Chair Scarano,
Aye.
Clerk Zaroulis,
Aye.
and Member Rue.
Aye.
Chair votes aye as well, so motion carries unanimously 4-0. It is 1:46, and this meeting has been adjourned.